Hey Zach, you get a good nap?
Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back. If you're new here, I'm so happy that you're here. My name is Anna, and I read books. And thanks for coming as I'm learning to make matcha. I got a new matcha kit for Christmas, and it's always been one of my favorite drinks. So I'm trying to learn. Obviously, it's a bit diluted. I put too much oat milk in it, but it still tastes really good. So hopefully I can get better at that in the future. If you have any tips for like matcha recipes, please drop those below. But anyways, Happy New Year, guys. Welcome to 2025. How are we here already? That's actually insane to me. Like 2024 like just started yesterday. What do you mean? But today basically we're going to do a few different bookish things, and let's get to it. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about my 5-star reads of this year. I'm gonna put the statistics up actually right now. All right, now that we've done statistics, let's get back into it. So I've tabbed my book journal. I gotta tell you guys the truth, I'm not the biggest fan of this book journal. It was really cool at the beginning. I was like, oh my gosh, it's got so many great like things to do in it. But like the reason I bought it was because I do not have I have a printer at home, but I can't afford to constantly be buying colored ink. And I don't have the time to scrapbook everything because, let's be for real, this is not my full-time job, at least not yet. And I'm still in school, so I can't be doing all those things that all the booktubers are doing. Though I would like to one day. So I had this as my compromise. But the problem with this book journal is it had me write a review for literally every single book that I read. And it was kind of getting tiring because even though I didn't read half as many books as I read last year, it's still a lot, especially when you really didn't like the book. Like if I really passionately hated the book, then I could rant on it. But if I felt so mid about it, I was like, I do not want to spend a whole review note section and waste that whole page on that book. So we'll have to figure out something to do differently in the new year because that's just questionable. But anyways, I tabbed my journal based on the white tabs or tan tabs are the 5-star books this year. The blue ones are the honorable mentions, and the gray ones are my 6-star books. 6-star books, let me explain, are basically like 5-star was not enough. This is a life-changing, monumental book. And I only had just a couple of those this year, which if I had them all the time, they wouldn't be 6-star books. You know, they'd be 5-star. So yeah, let's just get into it. So first of all, 5-star books. Actually, book number 4 that I read this year was a 5-star book. And that was Of Ashes by Anna Miriam Brown. It is a fictional, almost retelling, story diving, elaboration on the story of the adulterous woman and the leper that Jesus heals in the Bible. And those people were never given like backstories. In the Bible, we know very little about them except for the fact that they came into contact with Jesus and he healed them. So she took creative liberty and gave them backstories that were very honestly realistic to what would happen in that time. And it was just such a powerful and moving story. It's also a full-length audio musical on Spotify that is just phenomenal, and I highly recommend it. Please go listen to it. I bawled my eyes out, and as a Christian, it just reminded me why I'm a Christian in the first place and how loving Jesus is and how amazing he is. And so yeah, I highly recommend that. And if you're not a Christian, I also highly recommend it because it really just genuinely shows the beautiful nature of how loving Jesus is. And if you're curious about that, I think that's a great place to start. I mean, obviously other than the Bible. But yeah, it was a great read. The second 5-star read, we'll go back to honorable mentions, was All In, which is number 3 in the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Actually, we're going to include this honorable mention because one of them was The Naturals. Just as a series in general, there's a whole video where I read all of the Natural series in one video, and it blew me away. Like, it's Criminal Minds, but make it teenagers. And basically, it's this group of teenagers who come and they're selected because they all have this, they're just natural at this ability, right? So some of them are like hyper observant. Some of them just like can do calculations in their mind super quick. What really stuck out to me about this book was it was just so intricate. Like the details, the plot line, how she connected the whole like math and everything in this was actually insane. She had like the Fibonacci sequence was one of the biggest points in this book, and I genuinely don't even think I can ever be that smart. Like, I don't consider myself dumb, but I definitely do not consider myself as genius as it took to write this book. I'm definitely not a math person, but Jennifer proved herself to be, because the understanding of everything and how it tied in, how she made a math sequence go to serial killing, I don't even understand. But yeah, that's also trigger warnings for this book. It does have to do with serial killers, so if that's not your thing, I would not recommend. The next 5-star book we have is, oh my gosh, so one thing I did not expect was most of my 5-star books this year were literally classics, including most of my 6-star books, which makes sense because obviously they're literary masterpieces for a reason, but I just did not consider myself like a classic reading person until this year, and I decided to try it and like do videos on it, and then that's how we got here. But one of these was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Oh, so good. It literally blew me away how you could be so attached and so invested in these characters within only 144 pages. He had this entire plot, he gave backstory and minimized it. It just made me think like how much we like as a society have like overdone stories. And I'm not saying like the 300-page books or more are not worth that length, but I'm like, are we really over exaggerating what could be sized down and still be impactful, if that makes sense? I also read this in a video. I don't remember which one. I'll find it and put it up here. But yeah, so if you want a more in-depth review, you can go read that. But it's seriously so good, so impactful. It is about an affair, so if that makes you uncomfortable, I wouldn't read it. But it also doesn't really, I don't recall it describing anything. There's not really any spice. There is one, it's set in the 1920s, like the Roaring 20s. So there's parties and sometimes they get drunk, and I think that was really the extent of the content in it. But if any of that bothers you, I mean, you can stay away. Everybody has their own boundaries. All right, next 5-star book is This Golden State by Merritt Weisenberg. I've literally never heard anybody talk about this book, period. Like, not a single soul. And I genuinely just randomly picked it up at the library, because sometimes I'll do that. I'll just browse my library for things that I never would have picked up otherwise. Like, if I go into a bookstore, I'm not going to buy a book that seems intriguing to me, because what if it's not good? But if it's in my library and I relatively like the plot, then of course I'm going to pick it up, because I can return it. I haven't spent any money on it. And it's just a great way to experiment and try new books. So, all right. Oh, so good. Anyways, basically, I feel like I talked about this in a video. I don't remember. But this basically was just, it was such a hidden treasure. Like, the plot was so good. It's basically about this girl who is constantly moving around to keep her parents off the grid. So she's constantly making new friends, finding new places, and she finally gets to this one place where she starts to fall in love, and she's like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Like, she doesn't even know who her parents are, which kind of gives her, you know, like an identity crisis. She doesn't even know who she is, because she's constantly changing her name. She's constantly moving around, and it's so interesting and such a great like self-discovery book of just like finding who you are and just discovering that. It was genuinely so beautiful in the way it was handled, the way her parents just showed their love for her, and everything was absolutely amazing. But yeah, it was definitely a 5-star book for me. All right. Anyways, the next one this one was technically a 4.75, but I was like, come on, that's a 5-star. And I genuinely don't know why I hadn't put it down as a 5-star, but that's Hello Stranger by Catherine Center, and I own it, but I'm not gonna get it right now. But genuinely, this book was so like surprising to me. I've read at this point had read another Catherine Center book, which was The Bodyguard, and I liked that. It like wasn't my favorite, but it was really good. So I was like, okay, I'll give this one a try, and I absolutely adored it. I'm pretty sure I also talked about this one, but it's about this girl who ends up getting this condition called face blindness, where basically you can see the features of a person's face make a full face, so you can't recognize anyone except by their like neck down. And so it was very like interesting to learn about that condition and like how that pertained to this romance. I feel like it was maybe 2 or 3 on the spice level. And there was a little more than kissing. And like I said in previous videos, like if something is extremely spicy, I'm gonna put it down. And that's just because like in like my personal walk with God, I feel like I've been convicted on that, like as far as saving myself for marriage or whatever. And like everybody has their own convictions, as I've said before. Like if you like spice, great. If you don't, great. Like everybody does their own thing, and God convicts people differently. And even again, especially if you're not religious, I don't want you to not feel like you're welcome here. I genuinely am just sharing my personal experience, but I'm never judging anybody else's. We are all on different walks in life, and hopefully me sharing that helps you. But as readers, we shouldn't judge each other, and we should just be helpful to everybody else. So anyway, yeah, the spice I put right here actually 2 out of 5. It says kissing but alludes to but doesn't happen, so we're good. It was close to it, which probably makes sense why I rated it 5. But yeah, it was just like so beautiful to see like the story of life, and it was a little cheesy at the end. I do remember that, and there were some points where I was like kind of cringing, but it was like a cute cringing, if that makes sense, because sometimes I just want a giggly happy romance, and if it's too cringy, of course I'll put it down. But this one was just enough mix that I was like, okay, I really like this. The next 5-star book I had was another classic, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Was literally so good, and this has been recommended a few times on popular booktube channels, especially with Haley Pham when she read like what Taylor Swift wrote. I think, or read, sorry. There's one song that Taylor Swift does, I'm not exactly sure, but it was inspired by this book. I was like intrigued. I'm not a Swiftie, but when Haley Pham recommends something, I'm gonna read it probably. So I read it, and holy cow, guys, like I think this was what got me on my classic kick this year, because it just opened a whole new world. I was like, I did not know classics could be like this, and it was so intriguing. The plot was so amazing, and Daphne du Maurier is literally like one of the most literary geniuses I've ever read. Like her writing was phenomenal, and I think what really hit me of the impact of how good her writing was the main character never gets named in the entire book, and I'm pretty sure it's in first person, but you never find out her name, but you're still intrigued, and you still care about her, and you still care about what's happening, and it like never bothers you, like you never go to question it, if that makes sense. And I just thought that was literally so genius. Moving on, but yeah, highly recommend that one. But it also, trigger warnings, has to do with a mystery and a murder and the ghost of a dead wife. So like there's grief, there's kind of insanity, and I think there was thoughts of suicide somewhere. So if any of that bothers you, I would stay away. Moving on, the last 5-star book I have is another classic. So many of these are classics, guys. And that's The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This book was so good at, like, for its time period, this was like unheard of. Like Hawthorne was breaking grounds, and he really was trying to separate himself. If you don't know, Nathaniel Hawthorne, his grandfather was a judge in the Salem witch trials, and he was really trying to separate himself politically from the Puritans, because he did not believe in what they were doing. He did not agree that what they were doing was right, and it was not right. It was absolutely wrong. Like, whole other topic, but it was just wrong. And anyways, so he was trying to separate himself from that. He added an E to his last name, so it was different. But this book really tackled like some of the gray areas of the Puritans and what was wrong with their beliefs. Because Christianity, it's beautiful. Like, it's a great religion, and it's all about loving other people. But people have taken this too far in the past, including the Puritans, the Pharisees in the Bible. When it becomes too religious, and it becomes judging others, and it becomes this thing it was never meant to be. It was meant to be convicting but not condemning. Like John 3:17 says, he came into the world not to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. So yeah, it was really just teaching that life is not always black and white. In fact, more often it's gray. And in this story, we have an affair going on, and honestly, because of the horrible life situations of everyone, you end up kind of rooting for the affair, even though you know it's wrong. And it beautifully portrays like just the deep guilt, the deep sorrow and depression, and like how other people are placing this on them for their mistakes, but yet they're still good people. And it was just, and then they end up repenting and coming back to God before all of this comes to a close. And it was just, I don't even know how to explain the emotions this made me feel. I definitely would read this when you're in a more safe mental space, because I do deal with depression right now. I'm on medication for it, and it was definitely very heavy. Like, there was self-harm in it, and I remember like just relating to that very deeply. And there's definitely some heavier topics in this book, so I would definitely save it for a time when you think you can handle it. I had to read it because of school, but luckily, you know, I have really great friends in that class, and my teacher is 100% amazing. She's so understanding, and she was right there with me through that. But yeah, I would just wait for a better time. Anyways, on to honorable mentions. I don't know why this is 3.5 stars in my thing, because it was so much more than that. Honestly, it should have been a 5-star. Hang on. This was my first like actual like thriller book I'd read. I'd read a lot of mystery before, especially like Agatha Christie, anything like that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna expand my genre a bit. This book had me up the wazoo. Like, my jaw was on the floor at this plot twist. I cannot recommend this book enough. There's definitely some explicit language and some other content in it that would probably make you uncomfortable. It's definitely to do like with murder and everything. So if you can't handle thrillers, if you can't handle scary, stay away. There's stalkers, all that kind of thing. But it was genuinely just written so well. And I think I got a whiff of the end like in my mind, but I kind of pushed it back down because I was like, no, I was like so enthralled in the story that I was like, that can't be. I ended up being right, but I completely forgot that I had guessed it by the time I got there. And I was like, what? It was genuinely so insane. And I ended up reading it in school, and like all my friends were like, what? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why is your mouth wide open? Like, what is happening? I was like, there's no way right now, guys. This is insane. So yeah, that's a really good book. Please go read it. It's actually crazy. The honorable mentions was The Naturals. We already talked about that. And the last honorable mention I had by, I think it's Gita Trelease. If I said that wrong, French, like people who are French, please do not come after me. I only had 1 year in middle school. But it was so good. I picked up this book like I'd seen it before, and thought about getting it, but I was just like, I don't know, maybe I'll stay away. But then after like years of reading and discovering series like Once Upon a Broken Heart and Caraval, I noticed that Stephanie Garber had recommended this book on the back of it. Like, she has a quote, and I was like, okay, if Stephanie Garber recommends it, I'm gonna read it. So I read it, and it was so good. It's basically magic and then the French Revolution, and it takes place in Versailles, and it's just so good. I would say though that like the magic system can get a little dark, like the dress she wears, and like there's kind of like this magic that she uses that's kind of like almost sinister in a way. I don't know how to explain that. But yeah, so it's a little on the darker side, but it's not too dark to where you can't like, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but it was just really good. So yeah, I would really recommend that one. And it's not talked about like at all. It's just such a hidden gem. Definitely go read that. Then on to 6-star books. We'll erase that. Not really. I don't know. The first one, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I read this on this channel in this video. We'll put it up here. I don't know which one it was. But literally, this is my favorite book next to the Bible now. Like, it's so good. It's about two sisters in World War II. I won't go into too much depth because I have a reading blog on it, but genuinely just left me in pieces. Like, it made me sob. It made me just genuinely, like, the way she could write historical fiction as if it was happening to real people boggles my mind. And it was genuinely just one of the most fantastic things I've ever read. Yeah. But every Kristen Hanna book is, let's be for real. So highly recommend her, even if you're not a historical fiction person, because I wasn't until I read her. But her books are just, there's something else. And the next one is actually a nonfiction book. Did not expect that. It's Kisses from Katie by Katie Davis. This is a story about a 19-year-old girl who goes and becomes a missionary in Uganda, which, if you don't know, I have been a missionary to Uganda for the past 3 years, and I intend to become a full-time missionary overseas when I'm an adult. I don't know to which countries. I plan to travel all over. I'm planning to go to Romania this summer. I have already been to Uganda, Istanbul, Turkey, Rwanda, and Belgium. So those are the countries I've been to, but Uganda has been my target of my missions the past 3 years. So I highly related with her because we're similar in age, and just the stories of that she would share about, like, the kids and the people she dealt with in the slums, and it just was so related to my own story. And I genuinely, when I was reading this book, she was talking about how she was feeling God confirm her calling to be there. And I genuinely was, I was actually reading it while I was in Uganda, like on the bus, while we were traveling across the country. And I just felt this, like, peace in my spirit. Just like, Anna, this is what you're called to. Like, this is what you were made for. And I was like, yeah, this is it. And we went to this one school over there that we'd been to before. That's a kind of a poorer school. And I was playing and doing this, like, tickle fight with all the little kids. And I genuinely just had this moment in that moment where I just thought, I have never been happier than I am right here. I could do this for the rest of my life. And that's when I just knew I was called to missions. And I can't wait to see where the Lord takes me with that. But yeah, this book was a big part of it. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful story of love and God calling people and just helping others. So I would highly recommend it. And then the next 6-star book was, again, a classic, and that was 1984, George Orwell. I read this book in the last video I did, which was Reading Like Rory Gilmore. This book just blew me away. The fact that this was written in 1949 as a dystopian, and he literally predicted the exact future we're living in, insane to me. I can't get over that. And it's such a, like, it is a very political book. There is some fade to black scenes, but I would just, it is definitely heavy. It's definitely a wake-up call. And it's a warning of what's coming, and I definitely think it's very important that we read this right now in this time. But yeah, highly recommend that. And then the last 6-star book, Little Women. We all know I love Little Women, and you can go back and watch that in the vlog, but every time I reread that book or rewatch one of the movie adaptations, I'm just torn to pieces and just left in awe at how Louisa May Alcott can write such a simplistic story about 4 girls and their lives, and it stands the test of time throughout generations because it relates to us so much. And I definitely relate to those characters, and it's something I will reread over and over and still love because it's just that good. And I hope with all of my heart that I can write like that one day. All right, everybody, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been an amazing year. I've officially been doing YouTube for 1 year. That is crazy. I started out with 1 subscriber and we're up to 360. That is just absolutely insane to me. But thank you so much for coming along for the ride. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reading. I love you all so much. Please have a fantastic 2025.